This video is proudly sponsored by Chill Blast, the UK's most awarded PC manufacturer, delivering high-performance racing sim PCs to your door. Designed, built and tested to provide the highest performance in your favourite racing sims. Pick from the Chill Blast range of PCs specifically designed to offer flawless, high-resolution, high FPS racing, or work with them to design something specifically for your needs through their online configurator or their dedicated staff. Chill Blast build and test the PC to ensure perfect performance and provide a 5-year warranty to ensure you never miss a race.
Hey guys, it's Mike for RaceDepartment, and today I am joined by Renato of Reiza Studios, and I'm very excited to chat with Renato. Obviously a big fan of his work and doesn't do a lot of interviews, so Renato, thank you so much for being here and taking the time to chat with me.
My pleasure, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Cool. So obviously most people know you through Automobilista, Automobilista 2, but Reiza Studios is older than that. You had projects before that. Can you tell us a little bit about the early days of Reiza Studios and how you got started in game development?
Sure. We actually started back in 2009. I had just come off a stint working for Simbin, which was my first professional gig working in racing game development. And it was a great experience, and it was enough for me to be convinced that's what I wanted to do with my time. So I started looking around. I want to have something of my own, which I would have a little bit more control of. So I started looking around to see if I could find people in the community that would be willing to join me in something new. I was lucky enough to be able to assemble a really good team of people with the right skills that we needed to put a new game together. We managed to work out something with ISI, who at the time had the game engine that we wanted to use, and that was it. That was the beginning. And being a Brazilian company based in Brazil, it made sense for us to try to put something together with a Brazilian series, where we had a very long and rich motorsports culture from the country, which had never featured in any game of any kind. And that seemed like a good enough place for us to start and put something fresh, new together. So for the first few years, we were focused on that, working on the Brazilian Stock Car series, which was the first game that we did and released back in 2011. Then we had a follow-up in the following year, and then a new game in 2013. Also the truck series, which we made a game of around the same time. And from that base, we gradually began to expand and start dabbing into series from all over, actually, and expand the horizons a little bit to continue to feature those Brazilian series, which are important to us, but also expand into other motorsports types, which also are interesting to us. And that's how we came to we jumped from doing the stock car game to Automobilista, which was the first one that he really had a little bit more a broader scope, so to speak, with tracks from Europe, tracks from the States, and we've been on that track since, gradually getting bigger.
Excellent. And yeah, Automobilista is certainly when I first heard of you, and you mentioned ISI there, and a lot of people do immediately make the association between Automobilista 1 and obviously R Factor ISI, and I think it caught a lot of people by surprise that for the sequel to Automobilista, you went with the Madness engine. Can you tell us a little bit about how the decision was made to go with the Madness engine versus what you had experienced with previously?
Sure. After Automobilista 1, even Automobilista 1 was actually how can I say, a intermediate step for the title that we really wanted to do, which was Automobilista 2. At first, we were planning to develop the ISI engine that we had just licensed to be the base of Automobilista 2. But as we went on developing Automobilista 1, we began to find that was going to be a little bit too much for us, because we never had a very big programming team. So our engineering ability at the time, at least, wasn't enough to develop the engine into something that we really needed to make Automobilista 2 more competitive. So at that point, we started looking around to see what were the options, other game engines that we could use. And the Madden's engine was actually a very good option because it actually also came, even though from a long while back, it also was born out of ISI technology. So there was still a little bit of DNA there, some overlap in terms of technology. But obviously, they had developed that into a full-blown AAA game engine. So it was just our good fortune that around the time that we were looking, it was actually Slightmad Studios who came talk to us about a potential collaboration. And I was talking to Ian Bell, who was head of the studio at the time, trying to work out something. I made clear that we wanted we had a commitment to develop Automobilista 2 already dating back from a few years. And we decided the best way to start a collaboration was for us to use the Madden's engine for Automobilista 2. And they were kind enough to allow us to experiment with that for a little bit to decide whether that was something that we could work with, because at that point the engine was a complete mystery to us. We obviously didn't have an inside knowledge of how the engine worked. And after a couple of months, we were confident that we had something that had great potential and that we could work with. So that and the fact that we had a willing cooperating partner in Slightmad Studios made the decision for us.
And just talking about the implementation of the Madness engine and the associated physics, the physics in AMS2, the driving experience in AMS2 has been somewhat polarizing. There's many of us in the sim community.
You can say that.
Yeah, I'm just curious what your take is on that. Do you feel that it's possibly that you're still in development and there's still improvements to be made, or are people who are critical of it? Do you think there's any basis to what they're saying, or have they just not tried enough of the content to get used to the feel? What's your sort of take on the criticisms or the polarizing nature of the driving experience in AMS2?
I have two main impressions about the discussions regarding the physics in Automobilista 2. I think on one side, we certainly have room to improve still. We surely made some mistakes, especially early on. As we were getting a grasp on the physics engine, we had several major differences to what we were used to before. So it took a little bit more time until we had a firm grasp on the physics engine itself. So there were certainly some mistakes along the way, which I think contributed to some not so positive impressions, especially early on. And of course, we have a very large pool of cars in the game. So I think almost inevitably some of them will be a little bit more polished than others. Our goal is always to make them 100% as good as we can make them. But it is a process, and in some cases we get there quicker than others, not because we gave it more attention or because we like some cars more than others, but that's just the way it goes. Sometimes you get something right away, and some others you have to gradually figure it out, and it's a little bit slower process. I think that's one side of it, and I think we certainly have room to fine-tune things further. But on the other side, I think right now we have a pretty competitive game on the physics side. We still have surely room to improve things further. But I don't think that any criticism of the game as it is now is necessarily down to the physics itself. I think there's a variety of reasons why people may not connect with the game, not only partially because of physics, but also maybe because of the audio, maybe the visual side of things and the force feedback. There are several ways that can lead to people not connecting with the game for one reason or another. And when they don't connect with it, they'll naturally try to justify it. Why is it that the game is not working for them? And the opposite is also true. When you connect with a certain racing sim, you tend to validate that, right? You tend to justify that game and tend to glaze over some flaws that may still have. So I think that's all natural. I think inevitably you're not going to please everyone. Obviously, different racing scenes will go about things differently, and some people will tend to connect more with a certain tire model more than others. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the physics is less developed or less advanced than others. I think fundamentally we're not trying to simulate other things, right? We're trying to simulate reality, and people will inevitably go about it different ways. And I think inevitably some people will connect more with it than others. Not everyone will like the same game, and that's true also for other sims. I think maybe because of the game engine that we're using, we tend to get a little bit of how can you say it? Strong opinions already built in with the fact that we're using this engine. So that comes with the territory to some extent, but I'm pretty confident that we have something that's very competitive in terms of physics and with the potential to get better. So I don't really see this as an issue for us, and I only expect things to get even better than they are already.
Sure, I would agree. And you've been very open in the Reiza Studios forums about your development and what you're working on. But just curious on the physics front specifically, or physics and force feedback, let's say, is the plan moving forward as you're sort of improving and working on the physics and force feedback in AMS2? Do you approach it moving forward from now, let's say, do you approach it as the entire game, like you want to improve the tire model for all cars, or are there certain classes you're working on more than others? Or sort of, can you tell us a little bit about your approach from now forward about the physics and force feedback?
Well, we're always trying to improve everything. And a lot of it, when it comes to physics and force feedback, a lot of it comes down to fine-tuning. Small details, especially in the tire model, that you're not fundamentally changing the technology behind it, but you're changing the parameters that you're inserting into it, and that can have a drastic effect on the driving experience. So it's a small change that sometimes leads to big differences in terms of how it feels, how it drives. So inevitably, we're always looking to make things better across the whole game. There's not one car that we're focused specifically. Naturally, the ones that we're less happy with, we'll tend to give a little bit more attention to bring it up to the level we think others already are at. But there's no really big magic about it. It's just, and there is no big change on the technology itself, which is a common misconception. Sometimes people will think that things need to change on the physics engine itself in order to get better, and that's not necessarily the case. Sometimes it's just a case of getting the parameters right and getting the physics model of a certain car more polished, more fine-tuned in order to deliver the driving experience that it should be delivering.
Right. And just talking about development more broadly, because I know Automobilista 1, obviously classic racing sim, and in my opinion, one of the greatest ever made. And that one was just kind of, I think I speak for many in the sim community, where a friend referred you to Automobilista 1, or you heard about it through forums or a very specific way. But Automobilista 2 is kind of in a different era now. Like, there's so much social media involved, and it's sort of a balance, I imagine, as a game developer to share and promote through different social media channels. And can you tell us a bit about how the process of game development has changed between Automobilista 1 and Automobilista 2, especially as it relates to sort of promoting through social media and sort of balancing the good reviews with the bad reviews and trying to stay on top of all that?
It hasn't really changed that much in terms of how we developed Automobilista 1 and are developing Automobilista 2 now. You're right that things have changed around considerably in the last few years, and there is a lot more noise coming from the internet and a lot more expectations. We tend to focus on doing the work and letting the results speak for themselves. I think with Automobilista 2, that's maybe not working out so well because of when the game was announced. At the time, I think there was not a lot new coming up in the sim racing scene. Maybe because of the game engine that we're using and the history it has, people already have some preconceptions about it, and that tends to stimulate a little bit more, how can you call it, a bit more loud opinions about how good and how bad it may be. What we have found since we released it is that we have a lot more, even though we released the game with the announced intent to develop and to make it evolve over a long window of time, there was always a lot of scrutiny from the very beginning, and expectations about what it had to do, how good it was, and a lot of backlash when we were not doing something right. And sometimes it feels a little bit disproportionate with the fact that we are still the smallest studio of all the studios that are focused on racing scenes out there. We still have the youngest racing scene. It's been out for almost 18 months now, but it's still relatively young when you consider how long racing scenes tend to develop. There are games that are out there for over a decade now, right? And they're still with active development. The expectations sometimes seem a little bit mismatched with the fact that we have this position, but ultimately it helps us make things better faster, right? It drives us. It puts a little bit more pressure on us, but it also drives us to make things as good as you can, as fast as you can. And I think ultimately that's what everyone wants.
Absolutely. So switching things up a bit, I just want to talk a bit about the content in Automobilista 2. And there's a lot on offer. There's, GT cars, classic, formula cars. There's so many different classes of cars on offer, and there's so many great ones to drive. And I just want to know sort of where you are in terms of development. Are you happy with the amount of content right now in AMS2? I mean, I just read the development update, and it looks like there's a lot more coming still. But in its current state, do you think you're about where you should be with the amount of content on offer in AMS2, or is there still a lot more to come? And we'll maybe hold off on the teasers for now, but sort of, can you give us an idea of how your satisfaction level is with the amount of content on offer in AMS2?
Well, we're certainly happy with what we have managed to assemble in what has been a relatively short window of time. Not just the amount, but the quality and diversity of the content that is there. As you said, you have everything from classic vintage Formula 1 cars to modern GT cars and tracks from famous tracks from today, and also versions of the same tracks from decades ago, which is pretty unique, something that I think we're the only ones actively working on this type of historical content. And you have a lot of big prestige brands in the sim, which can be taken a little bit for granted since these brands are present in most sims. But it feels special for us because we have managed to get to this position as a fairly small studio. So to be able to develop these relationships with these companies and to be able to afford them, given where we were even a few years ago, for us it's an achievement and something that we're very proud of. I wouldn't say that we are happy with how much we have at the moment. We certainly feel that our ultimate goal with Automobilista 2 is to offer a very broad motorsport simulator. So we want to at least sample a little bit of everything that makes motorsports interesting, and every interesting motorsports class that is out there. I think we have many of them there, but there are still some gaps that we want to fill. So there is certainly going to be more, and I think by the end of the year, we are going to have pretty much half of the calendar of most major series in the world, and many cars of this series represented in the sim, which I think it's a pretty cool achievement and a respectable, unique collection that we will have in Automobilista 2 that you can really find anywhere else.
Yeah, and I think it is an achievement. I think you're right. I think you folks have done amazing work to get it to this level. And I want to ask you though, I want to ask you sort of what you're most proud of. Like if somebody was stepping into Automobilista 2 for the first time, maybe it's a friend of yours and they phoned you up and they said, "Hey, what should I try first?" Is there a particular car track combo or a couple of combos you could give us where you feel that it's just an amazing experience that perhaps everyone should try? So what are your favorite car track combos and things people should try in AMS2?
I have several favorites. They tend to fluctuate a little bit depending on what we were working on at the time. Usually, I put up when somebody goes to my home, or a friend goes to my home and wants to try the simulator. I usually will set up one of the historical Formula One cars, the V10 or the V12, as those tend to be quite impressive. But the real quality of Automobilista 2, I think the one thing that is exceptional about it is not the fact that you have this type of series, this type of car done very well, or this track, but a variety of very different experiences that you can have with a couple of clicks, right? You can go from driving GT3 cars around Monte Panorama to a V10 from a V10 race in 1990s Spa, and then race Brazilian stock cars or trucks around Cascavel, and then go to drive a rental car in some local track. You have this really wide range of driving experiences that you can have, all represented to a very good standard and in a cohesive way, all within the same game. And I think that ultimately is what is really unique about Automobilista 2 and what other games don't necessarily offer.
Sure. And just a couple more questions for you. And it's interesting because I've been with AMS2 since beta, and I remember trying it out at first. And one thing that I felt really needed improvement was the AI, but it's been brought up to this amazing level now, and I have some great single player races. And so I think AMS2 is just a fantastic single player sim. But people have been asking about the multiplayer experience and sort of when that's going to be more fleshed out. And can you tell us a little bit about the sort of either medium or long-term development goals of the multiplayer experience?
Sure. I think one of the mistakes we made early on was underestimating how big multiplayer racing had got in recent years, because even up to a few years ago, 5 years ago, 70% of the player base of any racing game was focused on offline play. Only the niche inside the niche, the real hardcore guys, would be regularly racing in multiplayer and would find the multiplayer experience all important in a racing game. Things have shifted since then. I would say that it's more like 50-50. Half the player base are really committed to multiplayer experience. So if you're not offering a really good experience there, you're going to be alienating a good part of your potential player base. So that was a mistake. And another mistake that I would say is that we expected things to be working on multiplayer in a way that it wasn't necessarily so. It wasn't reliable enough. It wasn't. It didn't have all the required tools that people need to race regularly in multiplayer, and that's in part a result of us not really getting a grasp on what the engine was offering to begin with, and in part some mistakes that we made along the way that made multiplayer a little bit more limited. And our focus from the very beginning, our perception was that the game needed more development to the AI in order to be competitive with what we were offering before, with what we had with Automobilista 1, which by the end of it had very good AI. So inevitably, our initial focus was on that single player experience, where, as you say, I think we made good strides. And our goal was to tackle multiplayer after that, and we expected multiplayer to be decent for at least for league play, for open servers. And the reality is that it really wasn't for a while, for the beginning. I think right now we have a more reliable experience already in multiplayer, and it's all about adding more features, adding a little bit more, a more robust, dedicated tool for people to set up races and manage races. More tools to organize multiplayer racing in the shape of a rating system that we're putting together and hoping to deliver by the end of the year. Eventually offering something in the shape of scheduled races, either by ourselves or through some third party. Something that will lead to users having reliable races every day. That certainly ultimately is the goal. And I think those can be achieved in not such a big window of time. I think by the end of the year, we're already being stronger shape there. And over the course of 2022, I expect Automobilista 2 to be a solid multiplayer option for people that are committed to that side of sim racing.
That's fantastic. And final question, and it's sort of an open-ended question. Any messages for your fans and supporters, and any teasers you can give us, perhaps? Like I say, I've read the development update. I know we're getting the BMW 2002. You mentioned historic tracks. More historic tracks are coming in the not too distant future. But any teasers, any messages for fans that you can give us?
We have a lot of interesting things still to come up. I think the ones that is more on the immediate horizon would be the second part of the Racing USA pack. The part one we already released back in June. Part two is expected to arrive in November. And I think people that are really fond of single seaters in North America will be excited for it. They will enjoy it, what we have in store.
Big smile on my face for that one. That's great.
Oh, mine too.
That's great. All right, Renato, I really appreciate your time. As I said in the beginning, I know you don't do these a lot, so I really, really appreciate it, and I know your fans do as well. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
My pleasure, Mike. Thank you.